I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. This is a story about betrayal, resilience, and the power that comes with wisdom and patience. To my son and his beautiful bride, I raised my champagne glass, watching the bubbles catch the light. My name is Cynthia Moore, 68 years old, and a retired English teacher of 35 years. My son Ethan beamed at me from across the reception hall in Jersey, his new wife Olivia glowing beside him in white silk and pearls that probably cost more than my car. I stood in the back of that reception hall, observing rather than participating. That's what happens when you reach my age. People see right through you, like you're made of tissue paper instead of flesh and bone. But I've learned that being invisible has its advantages. You notice things others don't, like the way Olivia's eyes swept across the banquet hall during her toast. Not with joy or gratitude, but with calculation, as if she were taking inventory of a new acquisition. Her gaze lingered on the crystal chandeliers, the imported flowers, the sterling silver place settings. I recognized that look. It wasn't love. It was assessment. Before the ceremony, she had embraced me with practiced warmth. "You raised such a strong man," she'd whispered against my cheek. "I promised to take care of him." Her perfume was expensive, suffocating, something French that announced its presence before she entered a room. I wanted to believe her words. God help me, I did. My late husband Richard would have seen through her immediately. He had a gift for reading people that I never quite mastered. But Richard had been gone for 11 years now, leaving me to navigate these waters alone. This old house in New Haven has been my anchor ever since, every creaking floorboard and chipped tile holding memories of the family we built together. I watched Ethan cut the cake with his new bride, his face flushed with happiness. My son, my only child, who once slid down these stairs on a laundry basket and scraped his knees on our driveway learning to ride a bike. Now he was a man of 35, an architect with his father's height and my stubborn chin. He deserved happiness. But as I watched Olivia feed him cake with a camera-ready smile, an uneasiness settled in my stomach that no amount of champagne could dissolve. "They make a lovely couple, don't they?" said a woman beside me, Olivia's aunt or cousin. I couldn't remember which. "Yes," I replied automatically. "They certainly do," but lovely wasn't the word that came to mind as I watched Olivia wipe frosting from Ethan's lips with a proprietary touch. Deliberate, strategic. These were the words that whispered through my mind as the music swelled and the newlyweds took to the dance floor. That night, in my hotel room, I removed my uncomfortable formal shoes and massaged my aching feet. The wedding had been perfect, by all objective measures. So why did I feel this hollow dread? Was I just being a foolish old woman, unable to let go of my son? Was I inventing problems because I feared being left behind? I stared at my reflection in the mirror, silver hair cut in a practical bob, laugh lines etched around my eyes and mouth. Time had changed me, but I knew my own heart, and my heart was sending warnings I couldn't ignore. Still, I decided to give Olivia the benefit of the doubt, for Ethan's sake, for the sake of family peace. Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps what I saw as calculation was simply the normal nerves of a bride on her wedding day. Perhaps what I interpreted as assessment was actually appreciation. I would wait, I would watch, and I would hope, with every fiber of my being, that I was wrong. 3 weeks after the honeymoon, Ethan called to invite me to dinner. "Olivia's parents are coming too," he said, his voice bright with the eagerness of a new husband wanting his family to blend seamlessly. "They can't wait to meet you properly." "That sounds lovely," I said, already planning which recipes to use. "I'll make pot roast, your favorite." "Actually, Mom," he hesitated. "Olivia thought you might want a break from cooking. We'll bring everything." I felt a twinge of something, not quite hurt, but displacement. Cooking for my family had never been a burden, but I swallowed my objection. Whatever makes things easier. When they arrived, Olivia's parents, Walter and Regina Jackson, swept into my home with the confident air of people accustomed to occupying space. Walter was a tall, imposing man with a diamond tie pin and a handshake that lasted a beat too long. Regina was sleek and polished, her designer clothes probably worth more than my monthly pension check. So this is the famous house we've heard so much about, Walter said, his eyes taking in my living room with an appraiser's gaze. How many square feet is it? Exactly? I'm not sure, I admitted. We never thought to measure when we bought it. It was just home. Charming, Regina murmured, though her tone suggested the opposite. And the neighborhood, I imagine the school district is quite good. I nodded. One of the best in the area. Not that it matters much to me these days. But it matters for resale value, Walter said, snapping a photo of my bay window with his phone. Property like this, in this location. Well, you're sitting on quite the nest egg. Cynthia. Before I could respond, Olivia appeared from the kitchen, carrying a tray of store-bought appetizers. Daddy, stop interrogating Cynthia about real estate. You promised. But her admonishment held no real reproach, and the look they exchanged felt like a private conversation I wasn't meant to see. Throughout dinner, the questions continued. How old was the heating system? Had I thought about converting the attic? Was the basement finished with each question? Something cold and heavy settled deeper in my stomach. You must forgive my husband, Regina said, sipping the wine they'd brought. Once a realtor, always a realtor. He assesses every home he enters. It's an occupational hazard. Of course, I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. No offense taken. After dinner, while Ethan helped me with the dishes, I noticed Walter wandering through my home, opening doors, examining fixtures, taking photos with his phone. For memories, he explained when he caught me watching. Such a lovely place deserves to be documented. When they finally left, I stood in my darkened kitchen, listening to the house settle around me. The silence felt different somehow, less like solitude and more like waiting, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Walter's appraising eyes, Regina's dismissive glance at my faded curtains, the way Olivia seemed to be cataloging each room she entered. They weren't visiting family. They were surveying property. The thought made me sit upright in bed, my heart pounding. Was I being paranoid? Reading malice into normal curiosity, or was my instinct trying to warn me of something I didn't want to face? Either way, I decided I would be more vigilant, not confrontational, not yet, just aware. Sometimes the best defense is simply paying attention. The next morning, I was carrying a stack of clean towels to the guest bathroom when I heard voices drifting from the guest bedroom. The door was ajar, and Olivia's voice carried clearly down the hallway. So when do we unlock this house? She whispered, her tone eager, impatient. There was a pause, a rustle of sheets. I froze, holding my breath. It's just sitting here, she continued, her voice low but intense. Do you know what a place like this could sell for? We could flip it, move into something more modern. How much longer is she really going to need all this space anyway? My heart hammered against my ribs. I couldn't hear Ethan's reply, if he gave one at all. Maybe his silence was his answer. The word unlock echoed in my head, as if I were nothing but a hinge in their way. The market in this area is hot right now, Olivia continued. And it's not like she can maintain it properly at her age. We'd be doing her a favor. I pressed my palm against the wall for support. The towels clutched so tightly my knuckles ached. My throat felt tight, as if all the words I might say were trapped there, unable to escape. Just leave it to me. Olivia's voice dropped even lower. I've handled situations like this before. Trust me, it's best for everyone. Situations like this, as if I were a situation to be handled. As if my home, the place where I'd raised my son, where I'd nursed my husband through his final illness, where every inch held memories I treasured, was just an asset to be liquidated. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to think. Confronting them now would accomplish nothing except alerting them that I was on to their scheme. No. I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to understand exactly what I was facing before I acted. So I stepped back silently, returned to my bedroom, and placed the towels on my bed. Then I went downstairs and made coffee. Extra strong. I would need the clarity. When Olivia came down 30 minutes later, I smiled and offered her a cup. "Sleep well?" I asked pleasantly. "Like a dream," she replied, leaning to kiss my cheek. "This house has such good energy." I nodded, watching her closely. "It does, doesn't it? I've always thought so." All day, I played along. I showed Olivia my garden, discussed recipes, helped her find a phone charger when she needed one. I laughed at her jokes and answered her questions about the neighborhood. I was the perfect mother-in-law, accommodating, pleasant, and utterly unsuspecting. But inside, my mind was racing. What had she meant by unlock the house? Was she planning to pressure me into selling, or was there something more sinister at play that evening? As I watered my hydrangeas along the fence, I made a decision. My late husband Richard once told me, "Never ignore a whisper when it scratches at your bones." I felt the scratch now, sharp and undeniable. They thought I was sentimental. They thought silence meant weakness. They were wrong. I wasn't preparing to surrender. I was preparing to watch and to fight, if necessary. Because this wasn't just about property. This was about respect, about autonomy, about the right to live my remaining years on my own terms. And no one, not even my beloved son, had the right to take that from me. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I finally understood just how far Olivia had taken her scheme. I was standing in the produce aisle of Whitman's Market, debating whether I needed more butter, when I heard a voice behind me. "Miss Cynthia, oh my goodness, it is you." I turned to find a young woman hurrying toward me, arms outstretched. It took me a moment to place her. Jasmine, Olivia's cousin. We'd met briefly at the wedding reception. "Congratulations," she gushed, hugging me as if we were old friends. I blinked, confused. "On what?" She laughed brightly, adjusting her oversized tote bag. "On selling the house. Of course, Olivia said you got an amazing offer. Everyone's talking about how fast it all happened." The fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright. My hand tightened around the shopping cart handle until my knuckles went white. "Excuse me." Jasmine tilted her head, confused by my silence. "Well, I just hope you're moving somewhere with an elevator this time. These old places are murder on the knees." "Right." She winked as if we were sharing a joke about aging, something I normally wouldn't mind, but now it felt like salt in an open wound. "There must be some misunderstanding," I said carefully. "I haven't sold my house." Jasmine's smile faltered. "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought Olivia mentioned at the family dinner last weekend that you were, well, that the deal was practically done." "Did she?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "How interesting." Jasmine shifted uncomfortably, sensing she'd stepped into something complicated. "Maybe I misunderstood. You know how family gossip gets twisted." She glanced at her watch. "Oh gosh, I'm running late. So good to see you. Miss Cynthia." She hurried off toward the deli counter, leaving me standing there, staring at bins of apples and oranges without really seeing them. Olivia wasn't just whispering plans in dark hallways. She was speaking as though the deal were already done, as if my signature, my consent, my very existence were nothing more than a technicality to be handled. I abandoned my cart, walked straight out to the parking lot, and sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with fury. Cold, clarifying fury that cut through confusion and hesitation like a blade. That was the moment I stopped hoping this was a misunderstanding. If Olivia wanted to play games with my home, then she was about to learn that I had more than memories to defend. I had the law, and I had a lifetime of experience she couldn't begin to imagine. Instead of driving home, I started my car and headed in the opposite direction. It was time to get some answers, and some help. Margaret Wilson's house hadn't changed in 20 years. Still the same cheerful yellow paint, still the same wind chimes tinkling on the porch. Margaret had been my colleague at Lincoln High School before retirement claimed us both. And if anyone would know the truth about the Jacksons, it would be her. Her late husband had been a prominent real estate attorney, and Margaret knew everyone worth knowing in 3 counties. "Tea," she offered, ushering me into her sunny kitchen. "Something stronger, if you have it," I replied. Margaret raised an eyebrow but reached for the cabinet where she kept her good bourbon. "That kind of visit, is it?" I told her everything, the wedding observations, Walter's probing questions, the overheard conversation, Jasmine's congratulations on a house sale that had never happened. Margaret listened without interrupting, her weathered hands wrapped around her untouched teacup. When I finished, she sighed deeply. I was afraid of this when you told me who Ethan was marrying. My stomach dropped. You know something about Olivia? Margaret nodded slowly. Not Olivia specifically, but the Jacksons. Walter Jackson had quite the reputation in real estate circles before he retired to consulting. She made air quotes around both words. Tom handled a case involving one of his developments about 15 years ago. The details were confidential, but let's just say Walter walked away when he should have been prosecuted. For what? Pressure tactics on elderly homeowners, using his daughter to gain their trust. Nothing that could be proven beyond doubt. But, she shrugged. Where there's smoke. I felt sick. Are you saying Olivia has done this before? Margaret reached for her laptop. Let me do some digging. Her fingers moved quickly over the keyboard. Here, 3 years ago, a Mrs. Eleanor Patton, 72, filed a complaint against an unnamed female relative of her property developer for coercion and undue influence. The case was settled out of court. She turned the screen so I could see the article. There was no photo of the defendant, but the description matched what I was experiencing with painful accuracy. And look at this, Margaret continued, pulling up another page. The Jacksons Investment Company filed for Chapter 11 last year, restructuring debt after a failed development in Phoenix. They're in financial trouble. Cynthia, serious trouble. The pieces clicked into place with terrible clarity. This wasn't just opportunistic greed. This was desperation, and I was the solution to their problem. What about Ethan? I asked quietly. Do you think he knows what they're doing? Margaret's expression softened. Oh, honey, that's the hardest question. Isn't it? I don't know your son. Not really. But people in love can be blind, or they can be convinced to see things a certain way. I stared out the window at Margaret's garden, thinking of the little boy who once made me Mother's Day cards with crooked letters and too much glue. My Ethan, my only child. Could he really be part of a scheme to push me out of my own home? What do I do now? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Margaret's eyes hardened with resolve. You fight, not with emotion, with strategy. They think you're an easy target because you're alone and sentimental about that house. Show them they're wrong. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. And Cynthia, you're not alone. Not while I'm still kicking. On the drive home, I took the long route along the harbor. The water was gray and choppy, matching my mood. I had decisions to make, difficult ones that might change my relationship with my son forever. I thought about what Richard would say if he were here. He'd been a problem solver, a man who believed in facing unpleasant truths head on. First, you gather information, he would say. Then you make a plan. Then you execute it without hesitation. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun was setting, painting my old Victorian in shades of gold and amber. It looked solid, dependable, like it had weathered 100 years of storms and would weather 100 more. I sat in my car, watching the light change on the stained glass panel above my front door, a detail Richard had insisted on preserving during our renovation 30 years ago. Some things are worth the extra effort, he'd said then. Some things were worth fighting for, too. I took a deep breath and made my decision. I wouldn't confront Olivia or Ethan directly, not yet. First, I needed protection. I needed to secure my position. I needed to be absolutely certain of what I was facing. Tomorrow, I would start making calls. Tomorrow, I would begin building my defense. For tonight, I would sleep in my own home, in my own bed, secure in the knowledge that while they might underestimate me, that was their mistake, not mine. I am Cynthia Moore, D.A. I've buried a husband, raised a son alone, and taught teenagers for 35 years. I've weathered worse storms than Olivia Jackson, and I was just getting started. I didn't drive home from Margaret's that day. Instead, I sat in the parking lot with the engine off, rain sliding down my windshield in crooked rivulets. I made a call I should have made years earlier. Beverly Doyle's office, said a crisp voice. This is Cynthia Moore. I need to speak with Beverly. It's urgent. There was a pause. Mrs. Moore, it's been... Goodness, it must be 10 years. 12, I said, since Richard's estate was settled. Of course. Let me see if she's available. Within an hour, I was sitting across from Beverly Doyle, the same attorney who had helped me navigate the legal labyrinth after Richard's death. She still wore her reading glasses halfway down her nose, her salt and pepper hair pulled back in the same no-nonsense bun. The office had changed, sleeker furniture, younger staff, but Beverly remained a constant, steady presence. I placed my purse carefully on my lap and met her eyes. I think my daughter-in-law is trying to take my house. Beverly didn't flinch. She didn't express disbelief or ask if I was certain. Instead, she simply said, "Tell me everything," and pulled out a yellow legal pad. I did. The wedding observations, Walter's invasive questions, Olivia's whispered plans, Jasmine's premature congratulations, Margaret's revelations about the Jacksons' financial troubles and past questionable dealings. When I finished, Beverly tapped her pen against the legal pad thoughtfully. If they present a power of attorney you never signed, that's fraud. Plain and simple. Her words steadied me, like a hand on my shoulder in rough waters. What can I do to protect myself? I asked. Several things. Beverly pulled out a folder. First, we update your will with specific language about the house. We'll add a clause that no transfer of the property can occur without court supervision. I nodded, feeling the first stirrings of relief. Second, we establish a living trust for your assets. It's harder to challenge than a will. And third, Beverly's eyes met mine. We document everything, every conversation, every unusual request, every coincidence. We create a record that would make any judge raise serious questions about their intentions. We spent the next 2 hours going through my financial documents, updating my will, and creating what Beverly called legal armor. By the time we finished, my estate was fortified with signature seals and language strong enough to hold off even the boldest of thieves. One more thing, Beverly said as I gathered my papers. Get a safe deposit box at your bank. Today. Put your deed, your updated will, your insurance policies, anything important in it. No one else should have access. You think they might try to... I think it's better to be too cautious than not cautious enough. I drove directly to First National Bank. The young manager, who couldn't have been older than Ethan, looked slightly bemused at my urgency, but he set up the safe deposit box without question. One by one, I placed my important documents inside the deed to my home, my updated will, insurance policies, birth certificates I'd kept tucked away in an old cedar chest for years. As the heavy door clicked shut, I felt something inside me click too. They thought they were circling prey. What they didn't realize was that I had teeth of my own. Beverly had given me armor, but I knew armor wasn't enough. To fight back effectively, I needed a weapon. I needed proof. Marcus Hayes ran a bait shop on the edge of town, a simple wooden structure that smelled of cedar shavings and lake water. Most people saw just another retired man whiling away his days selling worms to weekend fishermen. What they didn't know was that before retirement, Marcus had been sheriff of our county for 23 years. I found him behind the counter, his fishing vest filled with pockets and secrets. His eyebrows rose slightly when I walked in. "Cynthia Moore," he said, putting down the fishing lure he'd been repairing. "Haven't seen you since the faculty Christmas party. Must be 5 years ago." 7, I corrected. Richard was still with us. Marcus nodded, his weathered face softening at the mention of my late husband. "Good man. Richard. Best math teacher my boys ever had." He studied my face. "Something tells me this isn't a social call. I need your help. Marcus, sit down." He gestured to a wooden stool. "Tell me what's wrong." I explained my situation, careful to stick to facts rather than emotions. Marcus listened with the practiced stillness of a man who'd spent decades sorting truth from lies. "I need to know what they're planning," I finished. "Not rumors, not guesses. Proof." Marcus studied me for a long moment, then scribbled something on a yellow legal pad. "You want it quiet or traceable?" I didn't hesitate. "Quiet. Very." He tore off the paper and handed it to me. It contained just one word: tonight. "I don't understand," I said. "You will." He turned back to his fishing lure. 9 o'clock, your back porch. That evening, after a dinner where I pushed food around my plate without tasting it, I sat on my back porch in the gathering darkness. At precisely 9, a shadow moved at the edge of my yard. Marcus emerged from between the oak trees, carrying a small duffel bag. Evening, he said quietly. Mind if I take a look around your house? For the next hour, Marcus moved methodically through my home, examining window frames, light fixtures, and electrical outlets. He said little, occasionally making notes in a small notebook. In my bedroom, he paused by a framed photo of Richard and me on our 30th anniversary. You know, he said softly, Richard came to me once, worried about someone taking advantage of an elderly homeowner in his neighborhood. Said the lady was being pressured to sell by her nephew. Turned out the nephew had forged her signature on some documents. I looked at him sharply. What happened? Richard gathered evidence, discreetly. The nephew went to jail. He put down the photo. Richard understood that family doesn't always mean protection. Marcus continued his inspection, finally stopping in the guest room where Ethan and Olivia had stayed. He ran his fingers along the underside of the bedside table, then nodded to himself. There's something you should know, he said as we headed back downstairs. I did some checking on the Jacksons before I came. Walter Jackson has been involved in 2 other cases similar to what you're describing. Both involved elderly homeowners who suddenly decided to sell valuable properties to Jackson's company at below market rates. My blood ran cold. What happened? Nothing that could be proven in court, but in both cases, a younger relative, usually a daughter or son-in-law, was involved in convincing the homeowner to sell. Olivia, I whispered. Marcus nodded. I can't confirm she was involved, but the pattern fits. What can we do? From his duffel bag, Marcus withdrew several small devices. These are legal audio recorders. I'm going to place them in common areas of your home, living room, kitchen, guest room. They activate by voice and run for 72 hours before needing to be recharged. I hesitated. Is this legal? In your own home? Yes. In Connecticut. Single-party consent is all that's required for recording. And you're consenting. He looked at me steadily. But if this goes to court, these recordings can only be used if they capture evidence of a crime in progress or being planned. Like fraud, I sadly said. Like fraud, he agreed. We spent the next 30 minutes concealing the devices in inconspicuous places, behind books on shelves, under the kitchen table, beside the guest room lamp. When we finished, Marcus handed me a small flash drive. If they catch anything, transfer the recordings to this. Keep it somewhere safe, not in this house. Why are you helping me? I asked as he packed up his equipment. Marcus paused. Richard was a good friend, and I've seen too many vulnerable people pushed aside by those who should protect them. His eyes met mine. Besides, I never did like bullies. As he slipped back into the darkness of my yard, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, Hope. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was gathering ammunition. 3 days later, Ethan called. Mom, Olivia and I were thinking of stopping by this weekend. Maybe staying over Saturday night. There's something we want to discuss with you. I gripped the phone tighter. Of course, honey. I'd love to see you both. I could almost hear his relief. Great, we'll bring dinner. Don't go to any trouble. After hanging up, I texted Marcus. They're coming Saturday. Staying overnight. His reply came immediately. Recorders fully charged. Remember? Act normal. Normal, as if anything about this situation was normal. Still, I spent Saturday morning cleaning the house, putting fresh flowers in the guest room, and baking Ethan's favorite chocolate chip cookies. When they arrived, I greeted them with a warm smile and open arms. Look at you two, I exclaimed, hugging Ethan tightly. Married life must agree with you. Olivia embraced me next, her perfume enveloping me like a cloud. Cynthia, you look wonderful. Have you done something different with your hair? Just the usual cut and color. I lied, having deliberately left my hair uncolored for this visit. If she'd really been paying attention to me as a person rather than an obstacle, she'd have noticed. We spent the evening in careful conversation, them asking about my garden, me inquiring about their new apartment. Beneath the pleasantries, I could feel an undercurrent of tension, particularly from Ethan, who kept glancing at Olivia as if seeking approval or encouragement. After dinner, Olivia excused herself to make a phone call. The moment she was out of earshot, Ethan leaned forward. "Mom, I've been worried about you living alone in this big house. All these stairs. The maintenance." I sipped my tea calmly. "I managed just fine, Ethan. But wouldn't it be easier in a place that's more appropriate for someone your age? Maybe a nice condo with a doorman and an elevator." The way he said "your age" made my teeth clench, but I kept my expression neutral. "I haven't given it much thought, to be honest." "Well, maybe you should." His voice took on an eager quality. "Actually, that's partly why we came. Olivia's father knows about this amazing retirement community in Newark. Full medical staff, activities, beautiful grounds. You'd love it." I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering the idea. "That's very considerate of Walter. He even has a contact who could help you sell this place quickly. The market's hot right now." "Is it?" I murmured, thinking of the recorders silently capturing every word. Later that night, after they'd gone to bed, I sat in my darkened kitchen, listening to the old house creaking around me. The home where I'd raised my son. The home where my husband had taken his last breath. The home that was now being sized up like merchandise. Tomorrow, I decided, I would play along a little longer, let them think their plan was working. The more they revealed, the stronger my position would become. A week after Ethan and Olivia's visit, Marcus handed me a small flash drive in the parking lot behind the old post office. No words, just a nod that spoke volumes. That night, with the blinds closed and a mug of tea going cold beside me, I plugged it into my laptop. Olivia's voice filled the room, not the syrupy tone she used with me, but raw, unguarded. "She's so clueless," she laughed. The sound sharp enough to cut. I recognized the background noises, my guest room, the night of their visit. "We'll flip that house the second she signs. Ethan's already looking at listings." There was muffled laughter in the background. She must have been on the phone. Then her voice again, sharper this time. "She won't fight us. She thinks silence makes her safe. It just makes her easy." A pause. "You should see this place. Monique? Original hardwood. Victorian details. Once we gut it and modernize, we can easily get 7 figures. My fingers tightened around the mug. Gut it, as if my home were a fish to be cleaned and filleted. "Ethan's worried about his mom, but I told him we're doing her a favor. She can't maintain this place. It's practically elder abuse to let her stay here." Another laugh. "Besides, that retirement place will keep her busy with bingo and water aerobics. She'll thank us eventually." I listened to the entire recording twice, my initial shock giving way to a cold, clear anger. This wasn't just about taking my house. This was about erasing me, relegating me to a controlled environment where I couldn't interfere with their plans. Then came Ethan's voice, hesitant but present. "I don't know, Liv. Mom seems pretty attached to this place." "Everyone's attached to their stuff," Olivia dismissed. "But she's getting older. What happens when she falls on these stairs or can't manage the yard? We're thinking ahead so she doesn't have to." "I guess you're right," Ethan conceded. "I just wish there was another way." "There isn't. Not if we want to get out from under your student loans and my parents' investment mess. This is our chance. Babe, don't blow it because you're feeling sentimental." I sat perfectly still, letting the words settle like ice in my veins. Then I reached for my journal and wrote it down. May 17th, 8:42 p.m. Audio evidence secured. Confirms intent to sell without consent. Flip that house stated explicitly. E. Participating but expressing doubts. I underlined flip that house 3 times. They wanted silence. Instead, they had just given me a confession. The next recordings were equally damning. Olivia on the phone with her father, discussing how to pressure me into signing over the property. Ethan and Olivia arguing about whether they were being fair to me. Olivia reassuring him that I would be happier once I adjusted to my new circumstances. By the time I finished listening, it was past midnight. I copied the files to a second flash drive and placed it in an envelope addressed to Beverly Doyle, to be delivered first thing in the morning. Then I emailed Margaret evidence secured. Moving to phase 2. Her reply came almost instantly. Despite the hour, gloves off now. Warrior. I slept surprisingly well that night, the kind of deep sleep that comes with absolute certainty. I knew what I was facing now. More importantly, I knew what I needed to do next. 2 nights after I listened to those recordings, Ethan showed up at my door alone. I saw him through the front window before he even knocked, standing there with his hands shoved into his pockets like a boy about to confess to breaking a window. I opened the door but didn't immediately invite him in. "Ethan," I said calmly, "this is a surprise." "Hey, Mom!" He stepped past me into the foyer, looking around as if the place had changed since his last visit, as if it no longer belonged to him. In a way, I supposed, it didn't. Not anymore. He cleared his throat. "I wanted to talk to you. About the future." "Of course." I led him to the living room. "Tea?" "No, thanks." He perched on the edge of the sofa, his posture rigid. "Olivia and I have been thinking. About my house," I finished for him. His eyes darted to mine, surprised. "Well, yes, about your living situation." "My living situation is fine." "Ethan," he shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, this house is too much for you. The stairs, the maintenance, the yard work. I have a gardener for the heavy lifting, and I'm quite capable of climbing stairs. Thank you. But for how long?" He leaned forward, earnest now. "Olivia and I worry about you. We found a really nice condo in Newark. Full staff, medical access, even a pool. You'd love it." I let him finish, watching the rehearsed words tumble out of his mouth. He was reciting, not speaking. Her script, not his. "And if I don't want to move?" I asked softly. He hesitated. "Then maybe we'd have to reevaluate things. It's hard for Olivia to feel settled when this place is just sitting here." "Sitting here?" I repeated. "You mean being lived in? By me?" His eyes darted away. He didn't want to say it outright, but the threat was there. If I stayed, I'd lose him. Or maybe he thought I already had. I wanted to shake him, to remind him who had carried him through pneumonia when he was 7, who had worked double shifts after his father died just to keep these walls standing, who had sacrificed everything to give him the education that led to his architecture degree. But I didn't. I stayed calm. "I'm not leaving," I said flatly. "Mom, please." "No, Ethan, this is my home. Not an investment property. Not a flip opportunity. My home." He stared at me. Surprise and something else. Shame, perhaps, flickering across his face. "How did you know about—" "I know more than you think," I said quietly. "About Olivia's plans. About her parents' financial troubles. About what you've been telling her family." The color drained from his face. "Mom, it's not what you—" "Isn't it?" I stood up. "Tell me, when were you planning to mention the power of attorney forms, or were you hoping I'd just sign without reading, like I did with the Christmas card list last year?" He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "You don't understand. We're trying to help." "No, Ethan, you're trying to help yourselves. To my home. To my life." "That's not fair. Neither is plotting to push your mother into a retirement home so you can sell her house." The silence between us was heavy, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock, a wedding present from Richard's parents, now witnessing this bitter moment between their grandson and me. "I love you, Ethan," I said finally, "but I will not be managed, manipulated, or moved against my will. Is that clear?" He opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally whispered, "Why are you being so difficult? Why can't you just trust us to know what's best?" And in that question, in the genuine bewilderment behind it, I realized the true depth of the problem. My son, my brilliant, kind-hearted son, truly believed he knew better than I did about my own life. Somehow, he had come to see me not as a capable adult with agency and wisdom, but as a problem to be solved, a situation to be managed. It was worse than anger. It was dismissal. "Because history isn't a burden," I told him quietly. "It's earned. This home, my independence, my choices, I've earned them all, and I won't surrender them. Not even to you." He stood abruptly. "I should go." I didn't try to stop him. The storm was pressing against the windows, and in the silence between us, I realized my son was no longer standing with me. He was standing with her. As the front door closed behind him, I felt a curious mixture of grief and resolve. The confrontation I'd dreaded had come and gone, leaving clarity in its wake. I knew now, beyond any doubt, that Ethan was fully involved in Olivia's scheme, whether through active participation or willing blindness. And I knew that the time for quiet preparation was over. Tomorrow, I would escalate my defenses. Tomorrow, I would ensure that neither Olivia nor anyone else could ever take my home from me. Because this wasn't just about property anymore. This was about dignity, about respect, about the right to age without being erased. And I was prepared to fight for all of it. The morning after Ethan's visit, I drove out to Hartford. The dogwoods were blooming pale pink along the sidewalks, their branches swaying like they knew secrets. I wasn't there for the scenery. I was there for Judge William Callahan, retired after 30 years on the bench and once a close friend of my late husband. He greeted me on the porch of his brownstone, his cane resting against the doorframe. "Well, Cynthia Moore," he said, his voice warm but sharp. "What storm brings you here?" We sat at his kitchen table with chipped mugs of black coffee, and I told him everything: the wedding observations, Walter's invasive questions, Olivia's whispered plans, the recordings that confirmed my worst fears, Ethan's betrayal. I spoke carefully, my eyes fixed on his as though I were back in his courtroom. When I finished, he didn't sigh or shake his head or offer platitudes about family reconciliation. He simply said, "You've already done more than most would. Now, let's make it permanent." Together, we drafted the framework for what he called ironclad protection, a living trust for the house, locked tight beyond the reach of probate or contest. A separate trust for my savings, hidden from anyone who thought they had a claim. And one more line, the one that mattered most: disinheritance for Ethan and Olivia if they attempted any further interference. For the heir. I didn't hesitate. I named Eleanor, my sister's daughter, a kindergarten teacher in Oregon who called me every month just to ask if I was sleeping well. She had no idea what she was about to inherit. Not just a house, but peace. "This is harsh medicine, Cynthia," Judge Callahan warned as I signed my name across the final page. "Are you certain?" I thought of Olivia's cold laughter on the recording, of Ethan's willingness to erase me from my own home, of the quiet dignity Richard had insisted upon until his final breath. "I'm certain," I said. As I drove home, I felt lighter, steadier. Ethan and Olivia thought they were circling prey, but I was building a fortress they couldn't breach. That evening, Beverly called. "The paperwork is filed," she said. "The trust is active. Your home is now legally protected against sale or transfer without your explicit consent, verified by an independent guardian the court has appointed. And if they try to declare me incompetent, it was the question that had kept me awake at night. Then they'll face 3 independent medical evaluations, testimony from your ongoing healthcare providers, and scrutiny of their own motivations and financial interests. We've built in every safeguard possible." I thanked her and hung up, then walked through each room of my house, running my fingers along the familiar surfaces: the banister Richard had refinished himself, the window seat where I'd read to Ethan on rainy afternoons, the kitchen counter that had hosted 35 Thanksgiving dinners. This was more than wood and plaster. This was the physical manifestation of a life well lived, and I had just ensured it would remain mine. The next morning I called Marcus. "It's done," I told him. "The house is protected." "Good," he said. "But they don't know that yet, do they?" I smiled into the phone. "No, not yet." "Then we're only halfway there. You've defended yourself. Now it's time to show them you're not to be trifled with." I understood exactly what he meant. It wasn't enough to quietly protect myself. I needed to make it clear, to Olivia, to Ethan, to anyone who might try the same tactics in the future, that I wasn't a passive victim. I was a formidable opponent. "What do you suggest?" I asked. "Let them come to you," Marcus said. "They will. They're getting desperate. And when they do, be ready." He was right. 3 days later, my doorbell rang. 3 sharp, impatient bursts. When I opened the door, there stood Olivia in a tailored blazer. Her smile stretched too wide. Ethan behind her with eyes fixed on the ground, and a weary-looking man clutching a clipboard. "Cynthia," Olivia's voice was bright with false cheer. "We've brought all the final documents ready for your signature. We figured it would be easier to do this smoothly. No surprises." She even held out a new pen, as though this moment were some kind of celebration. But there was a surprise waiting. Behind me, standing quietly in the foyer, was Deputy Monroe from the county sheriff's office, her badge glinting under the hallway light. Beverly stood beside her, holding a thick folder. I opened the door just enough to step outside, not inviting them in. Instead, I handed Olivia a heavy envelope, sealed with the court stamp. "This is for you," I said calmly. Her smile faltered. "What's this, that?" I replied. "Is a formal cease and desist order signed by Judge William Callahan, effective immediately. You are barred from any legal or financial action regarding this property." The man with the clipboard froze. Ethan's head snapped up, his face pale. Olivia blinked rapidly, flipping through the pages, her voice turning shrill. "This is a misunderstanding. We were trying to help you." Deputy Monroe stepped forward, her tone firm but measured. "Ma'am, you've been legally served. Any further attempts to proceed with unauthorized property transfer will be reported to the district attorney as attempted fraud." Ethan finally found his voice. "Mom, you called the cops on us." "No," I said evenly, my eyes on his. "I called the courts, and they answered." For a long moment, the only sound was the rustling of papers in Olivia's trembling hands. The storm had shifted, and for once, I was the one holding the thunder. "This is ridiculous," Olivia sputtered. "We're family. You can't—" "I can and I have," I interrupted. "Family doesn't try to take advantage of family. Family doesn't lie, manipulate, or scheme." Ethan stepped forward. "Mom, please, just listen." "No, Ethan, I've listened enough. To you, to Olivia, even to recordings of you both discussing how to get me out of my own home." His face went slack with shock. "Recordings, yes, quite illuminating. Especially the part where Olivia discusses flipping my house and how I'll eventually thank you for putting me in that retirement facility." Olivia's face flushed deep red. "You had no right." "I had every right," I cut in. "This is my home. You were planning to commit fraud. Connecticut is a single-party consent state for recordings. By the way, all perfectly legal." The man with the clipboard began backing away, muttering something about waiting in the car. "Smart man." Olivia grabbed Ethan's arm. "Come on, we're leaving." She clearly doesn't appreciate what we were trying to do for her. "To me," I corrected. "What you were trying to do to me. There's a difference." As they turned to go, I called after them. "And Olivia, you might want to tell your father that his pattern of targeting elderly homeowners has been documented and submitted to the state attorney general's office. Just in case he's thinking of trying this with someone else." She froze mid-step, then hurried to the car without looking back, dragging a shell-shocked Ethan behind her. Beverly squeezed my shoulder. "You did well, Cynthia." "I didn't enjoy that," I admitted as we watched them drive away. "No, but you needed to do it. For yourself and for others they might target in the future." Deputy Monroe nodded. "In my experience, people like that don't stop until someone makes them stop." I thanked them both, then went back inside and sat in my favorite chair by the window, watching the afternoon light play across my garden. I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a profound sadness that it had come to this. But mixed with the sadness was something else: pride. I had defended myself. I had refused to be erased. I had stood my ground. And that was no small victory. It didn't take long for the knock to come again. Barely 2 hours after the deputy left, I heard pounding on my door, louder, more desperate. This time, it was Ethan alone, his face drawn tight, his eyes red. "Mom, what is this?" he demanded, shoving the cease and desist order back at me as though it were burning his hands. "What are you trying to prove?" I unlatched the chain and opened the door wide enough to let the truth through. In my hand was another envelope, cream-colored, embossed, notarized. I pulled out the first page slowly. My name signed at the top. His name nowhere to be found. "It proves," I said softly, "that you are no longer my beneficiary. Not you, not Olivia, not anyone who sees me as a signature instead of a mother." He blinked as if I'd struck him. "You don't mean this." "I do." He shook his head, disbelieving. "You're disinheriting me, your only child, over what? A misunderstanding. Was it a misunderstanding when you and Olivia discussed selling my house without my consent? Was it a misunderstanding when you plotted to move me into a facility against my will? Was it a misunderstanding when you threatened that our relationship might have to be reevaluated if I didn't comply?" His shoulders slumped. "I was scared," he whispered. "Of what? Debt? Responsibility? Not being enough?" His voice cracked. "Olivia's family is in trouble. Mom, they lost everything in that Phoenix development. Her father, he's not a good man. He pressured us, said this was the only way to fix things. So you decided that dismantling my life would fix yours." He couldn't meet my eyes. "You inherit what you earn," I told him. "And what you've earned is absence." He stood there speechless, the papers trembling in his hands. From the sidewalk, Olivia's voice cut through, sharp and furious. "She's bluffing. Ethan, she won't go through with it." I turned toward her, my voice carrying clearly in the quiet afternoon. "This house no longer belongs to me. It belongs to a preservation trust. No sales. No inheritance. No access ever." Olivia's face crumpled. Ethan's shoulders sagged. And for the first time, silence felt like victory. But as I watched them walk away, my son's back bent with the weight of what he'd lost. Victory tasted bitter. This wasn't what I had wanted. Not for him. Not for us. Yet I knew I had done what was necessary, not just for myself, but for every older person dismissed as irrelevant, every parent treated as an obstacle rather than a person, every individual whose autonomy was threatened by those who claimed to know better. That night, I sat on my porch as darkness fell, listening to the sounds of my neighborhood, children laughing, dogs barking, the distant hum of traffic. The world continued its dance, indifferent to my small victory, my large loss. I thought about calling Eleanor to tell her about her inheritance, but decided against it. There would be time for that conversation. Tonight was for reflection, for mourning what might have been, for accepting what was. As I rocked gently in the chair Richard had built for our 10th anniversary, I wondered if I had been too harsh, if I should have found another way. But then I remembered Olivia's cold laugh as she discussed flipping my home, Ethan's willingness to erase my autonomy, the casual cruelty of seeing me as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. No, I hadn't been too harsh. I had been exactly as resolute as the situation demanded. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions. But tonight, I had reclaimed my space, my dignity, my right to determine my own future. And that was enough. The next morning, the sky over New Haven was startlingly clear, as though the storm had finally wrung itself dry. I was sipping coffee at the kitchen table when I saw Ethan's car pull into the driveway again. He moved slowly this time, no anger in his steps, just exhaustion. When I opened the door, he didn't try to force his way in. He stood on the porch, shoulders slumped, his eyes rimmed with red. "She's gone," he said hoarsely. "Packed up, went to her sister's. Said I blew it. Said you were supposed to be the easy part." I stayed quiet, letting his words settle. "She loved the money more than me," he whispered, rubbing the back of his neck. "And I let her." I nodded once. "You let her. I don't know who I am anymore. Mom." His voice broke. "I don't recognize myself. How could I have? How did I become?" He couldn't finish. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the boy I raised. The boy who used to race his bike down this street until the porch light called him home. But flickers aren't enough to erase fire. You're my son, I said gently. That will always be true. But respect isn't optional. If you want to become the man I know you could be, you'll have to do it without expecting reward. He nodded slowly, tears threatening. I understand. Do you? I think so. I hope so. He looked up at the house, then back at me. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I haven't earned that yet. I needed you to know that she's gone, that I see now what we were doing to you. I studied his face, looking for deception, for manipulation. I found only shame and regret. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. He nodded again, then turned back toward his car. He didn't ask for the house. He didn't even ask to come inside. He just left, shoulders lower than when he arrived. I watched him drive away, a complicated tangle of emotions knotting in my chest. Relief that Olivia was gone, sadness for my son's pain, caution about whether this change was genuine, and beneath it all, a flicker of hope that perhaps someday healing might be possible. But not today. Today was still too raw, the wounds too fresh. I closed the door and returned to my coffee, now cold. The house felt different somehow, as if it too were processing what had happened, adjusting to the new reality where it was safe, protected, mine, without question. That evening, Beverly called with an update. Walter Jackson is pulling up stakes, she said. My contacts tell me he's leaving the state, heading to Arizona. Apparently, there's been some interest from the Attorney General's office in his previous dealings. And Olivia gone with him, from what I hear. Left Ethan holding the bag. I sighed. He came by this morning, told me she'd left. Do you believe him? I thought about the defeat in his posture, the shame in his eyes. Yes, I do. Well, be careful. People like that don't change overnight. I know, I assured her. Trust me, I'm not rushing to rewrite my will. After we hung up, I sat by the window, watching the hydrangeas sway outside. Eleanor would inherit this place someday, but what she would really inherit was more than wood and stone. She would inherit the knowledge that her aunt had stood her ground, that love without respect is not love at all. It's a transaction waiting to expire, and mine finally had. A month passed. The summer heat settled over New Haven like a blanket, heavy and persistent. I fell into a new routine, morning coffee on the porch, afternoons in my garden or volunteering at the community library, evenings with books or phone calls with friends. Life continued, adjusted to the new reality where my son was absent, my home was secure, and my future was entirely my own. I heard from Eleanor regularly. She didn't know yet about the inheritance, but she called because she always had, because she cared. I heard nothing from Ethan, until one Tuesday morning in July, when a package arrived on my doorstep. No return address, just my name in familiar handwriting. Inside was a small carved wooden box I recognized immediately. Richard had made it for Ethan's 10th birthday, a place to keep treasures. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Inside lay Ethan's house key, along with a handwritten note. Mom, this belongs to you. I have no right to it anymore. I'm seeing someone, a therapist, trying to understand how I became someone who could hurt the person who gave me everything. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I'm trying to be better, to be worthy of being your son again someday. With deepest regret and love. Ethan, I ran my fingers over the key, feeling the familiar ridges. For a moment, I was tempted to call him, to bridge the gap that had grown between us. But Beverly's warning echoed in my mind. People don't change overnight. Trust, once broken, must be rebuilt slowly, deliberately, through actions rather than words. So instead, I placed the box on my mantel and wrote a short note of my own. Ethan, I've received your key and your note. I'm glad you're seeking help. That shows courage and wisdom. Time will tell where we go from here. I have always loved you. That hasn't changed. But trust must be earned back slowly. Take care of yourself. Mom, I mailed it to his office address, not expecting a reply. This wasn't about reopening communication. It was about acknowledging his gesture without compromising the boundaries I'd established. 2 weeks later, I was working in my garden when a shadow fell across the flower bed. I looked up to find Ethan standing awkwardly at the edge of the yard, a bag of mulch in his arms. "I was at the garden center," he said hesitantly. "Remembered you always mulch the hydrangeas in July." I sat back on my heels, wiping sweat from my forehead. "That's right. I thought I could help. Just with the mulch. I won't stay." I considered him for a long moment. He looked different, thinner, less polished, more real somehow. His expensive watch was gone, replaced by a simple leather band. His designer polo had given way to a faded t-shirt. Small changes, perhaps meaningless, or perhaps not. "The wheelbarrow is by the shed," I said finally. He nodded and went to work, spreading mulch around the hydrangeas without another word. We worked in silence for an hour, me pruning, him mulching, the space between us filled with unspoken words. When he finished, he gathered his tools and rinsed his hands at the outdoor spigot. "The east side could use some new edging," he observed. "The old brick is crumbling." "I know," I replied. "It's on my list." He nodded, hesitated, then said, "I could come back next weekend. Help with that." It was a question, not a statement. A request for permission, not an assumption of welcome. A small thing, but significant. "That would be acceptable," I said carefully. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Thank you." As he walked to his car, not the luxury sedan he'd driven before, but a modest older model, I called after him. "Ethan," he turned. "The therapist. Is it helping?" He considered the question seriously. "Yes, it's hard, but necessary." I nodded. "Good." That was all. No dramatic reconciliation, no tearful embrace. Just a small opening, a tiny bridge across the chasm that had formed between us. As I watched him drive away, I wondered if this was the beginning of healing or merely a temporary truce. Only time would tell. But for the first time since the confrontation, I felt a genuine hope that my son might find his way back, not to my house or my will, but to himself, to the person he was meant to be before greed and manipulation twisted his path. That evening, I called Beverly to update my trust documents. Not to reinstate Ethan as my heir, that would take far more time and evidence of genuine change, but to create a pathway for redemption, a series of benchmarks that, if met over the course of years, could eventually lead to reconciliation. "Are you sure about this?" Beverly asked. "I'm sure about creating a possibility," I replied. "Not a guarantee?" She understood. By the time we finished, the trust included provisions for gradual reconciliation based on demonstrated change, verified by independent parties, over a period of at least 5 years. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was something harder, more meaningful. It was justice with the possibility of redemption. The kind of justice that doesn't just punish, but transforms. And transformation, I had learned, was more valuable than any house, any inheritance, any material possession. It was the true legacy worth protecting. As summer faded into fall, Ethan continued his cautious, periodic visits. Never entering the house, never staying long, never asking for anything beyond the chance to help with yard work or minor repairs. Small steps, taken with deliberate care. On a crisp October morning, I was raking leaves when Margaret's car pulled into my driveway, unusually early for a social call. The moment I saw her face, I knew something had happened. "Walter Jackson was arrested yesterday," she said without preamble. "Fraud, elder abuse, multiple counts. It's all over the news." She handed me her tablet, open to the local news site. There was Walter's photo, his imperious expression now tinged with fear as officers led him from a courthouse. The headline read, "Property developer charged in elderly exploitation scheme." I scanned the article quickly. Walter had apparently moved on to another target after failing with me, an 82-year-old widow in Fairfield with a valuable waterfront property. But this time, his plan had unraveled spectacularly. The widow's son was a detective with the state police who recognized the warning signs and set up a sting operation. And there, buried in the third paragraph, was the detail that made my heart stop. Also implicated in the scheme is Jackson's daughter, Olivia Jackson Moore, who allegedly befriended elderly targets to gain their trust. "Ethan doesn't know," Margaret said quietly. "I checked before coming here. He's in court today on an unrelated case." I sank onto the porch steps, the implications washing over me. Ethan's estranged wife was about to be arrested for the very crime she had attempted to commit against me. His father-in-law was already in custody. The scandal would touch him, too, regardless of his innocence or guilt in this particular case. "What are you going to do?" Margaret asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "This changes things. Does it? Or does it just confirm what you already knew?" She was right, of course. This wasn't new information. It was validation of what I had suspected from the beginning, but validation brought its own complications, its own responsibilities. After Margaret left, I sat on my porch for a long time, watching the neighborhood children walk home from school, their backpacks bouncing, their laughter carrying on the autumn air. I thought about family, not just the family we're born into, but the family we choose to create through our actions, our loyalty, our love. Ethan had chosen poorly in Olivia, but perhaps, in his halting attempts at redemption, he was choosing better now. Just as I was about to go inside, my phone rang. It was Ethan. "Mom," his voice was tight with controlled panic. "Have you seen the news?" "Yes," I said simply. "I had no idea," he said. "About this new case. I mean, I knew what they tried with you, but I convinced myself it was an isolated thing, that they really believed they were helping you. And now I see the pattern." He paused. "Mom, I'm so sorry, so incredibly sorry for what I almost let happen, for what I was part of." The anguish in his voice was genuine. For the first time since this all began, I felt the hard shell around my heart begin to crack. "Where are you?" I asked. "At my office. The press have been calling all morning." "Come here," I said, surprising myself as much as him. "Not to talk about Olivia or Walter or any of that. Just come to dinner. We can sit at the table like civilized people and talk about the weather or books or anything else." The silence stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, in a voice thick with emotion, he said, "I'd like that. Very much." That evening, for the first time in months, Ethan entered my home, not as an entitled heir or a scheming son-in-law, but as a guest, careful and respectful of boundaries. We ate pot roast, his favorite since childhood, and talked about safe topics: the changing leaves, my volunteer work at the library, his recent pro bono case helping an elderly veteran secure benefits. As he was leaving, he paused in the doorway. "I filed for divorce," he said quietly. 3 weeks ago, before any of this broke. I nodded, understanding the significance of the timing. He hadn't left Olivia because of the scandal. He'd left because he'd recognized the truth on his own. "It will take time," I said, "for all of this to resolve." "I know," he replied. "I'm prepared for that." As I watched him walk to his car, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. The first tentative step toward healing. That night, I called Eleanor. It was time she knew about her inheritance, about the trust, about the provisions I'd made. It was time she understood the full story of what had happened and why. When I finished explaining, she was quiet for a long moment. "Aunt Cynthia," she finally said, "I don't want your house. I want you to be happy and safe. That's all that matters." "I know, dear," I replied. "That's exactly why you're the right person to inherit it. What about Ethan? Will you ever reconcile?" I looked out at the night sky, at the stars twinkling above the trees Richard and I had planted decades ago. "We've begun the journey," I said. Where it leads, only time will tell. And that was the truth. Not a fairy tale ending, not a neat resolution, but something more honest, the recognition that real healing doesn't happen in an instant. It unfolds slowly, tested by time, proven through actions rather than words. 3 years passed. The Heritage House, as I'd come to call it in legal documents, remained firmly in my trust, protected against any attempt to sell or transfer it without my explicit consent. Eleanor visited twice a year, helping me maintain the property, learning its history, understanding its value beyond mere real estate. Ethan and I rebuilt our relationship gradually, carefully. He continued his therapy. He completed his divorce. He moved from corporate law to elder advocacy, inspired by what had nearly happened to me and what had happened to countless others less fortunate. On a warm spring day, I invited him to Sunday dinner, a small tradition we had cautiously restored over the past year. This time, though, I asked him to come early. "There's something I want to show you," I explained. When he arrived, I led him to my study, where a folder of legal documents lay open on the desk. "What's this?" he asked. "The updated trust agreement for the house," I replied. "I've made some changes I want you to know about." He tensed visibly, his hands clasping together. "Mom, I'm not expecting—" "I know you're not," I interrupted gently. "That's part of why I'm doing this." I showed him the provisions I'd made Eleanor remained the primary heir, but Ethan would have lifetime rights to visit and maintain the property. More significantly, I had established a foundation in Richard's name, dedicated to providing legal assistance to elderly individuals facing exploitation or fraud. Ethan was named as one of the trustees. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because you've earned it," I replied simply. Not through entitlement or manipulation, but through genuine change, through becoming someone who protects the vulnerable instead of exploiting them. He studied the documents, clearly moved but struggling to express it. "Thank you," he finally managed. "I don't deserve this." "Perhaps not," I acknowledged. "But that's the thing about grace. Ethan, none of us deserve it. That's what makes it grace." We shared a quiet moment, both of us understanding that this wasn't about inheritance or property or money. It was about something far more valuable, the restoration of trust, hard-won and precious. As we moved to the kitchen to prepare dinner together, something we'd done countless times in the years before Olivia, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The Heritage House would always be my home, my sanctuary, but it was also something more, a testament to resilience, to the power of standing one's ground, to the courage required to protect what matters most. That evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, Ethan asked the question that had probably been on his mind for years. "Do you think you'll ever fully forgive me?" I considered my answer carefully. "I already have," I said. Forgiveness was the easy part. Actually, it was trust that had to be rebuilt, brick by brick. He nodded, understanding the distinction. "And have I rebuilt it?" "You're building it," I corrected. "Every day, with every choice. That's how trust works. It's never finished, never complete. It's a living thing that must be nurtured and respected." "Like this house," he observed, looking up at the Victorian facade with new appreciation. "Exactly like this house," I agreed. Both require constant care, ongoing commitment, and deep respect for their history. As darkness fell, I thought about all that had happened, the betrayal, the hurt, the confrontation, the slow path toward healing. None of it had been easy. All of it had been necessary. I am Cynthia Moore. I've buried a husband, raised a son, taught generations of students, and defended my right to age with dignity and autonomy. I've learned that true strength isn't about never falling. It's about rising every time you're knocked down. And I've learned that the most valuable inheritance isn't property or money or possessions. It's the courage to stand up for yourself, the wisdom to forgive without forgetting, and the knowledge that respect isn't optional. It's essential to any relationship worth having. So if you find yourself facing similar challenges, if someone tries to dismiss you because of your age, to manage you out of your own life, to treat you as an obstacle rather than a person. Remember my story. Remember that you have the right to say no, to stand firm, to demand the respect you've earned through years of living, loving, and learning. Because your life, your choices, your autonomy, these are your heritage, and they're worth fighting for. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below and tell me your story. And if you enjoyed this, check out 2 other stories that are channel favorites: When My Son's Wife Banned Me from Seeing My Grandchildren, and How I Discovered My Sister Was Stealing My Identity for 20 Years. Thank you for watching, and remember, age brings wisdom, and wisdom brings power. Never let anyone convince you otherwise.